Okay, we're taking a look at the game The Battle of Quebec, 1759. And it's by the Historical Game Company, and the designer is Stephen Kling. Now, this game is not about the Siege of Quebec, it's about the Battle on the Plains of Abraham. It's a simple game, it's got 48 or less counters, and I must say that it's one of the best of the simple games that I've played in years. And I mean simple. This rulebook is literally 2.5 pages long. You can read the rules in 15 minutes, and it is one hell of a game. I really like it. Now, I've got a particular interest in the Battle on the Plains of Abraham because I'm a resident of Canada, and the Battle of Quebec is kind of our national battle. It's one of the most famous battles in Canadian history, if not North American history. This battle did change the whole course of North American history. So we'll take a look at the board, the pieces, and introduce you to this just wonderful and innovative little game. Now, before I show you the game map, I'll show you this historical map so you'll have an idea of the way the map is oriented. Most of the time when you're looking at maps on the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, the orientation is to the north. That's north there, south, east, west. And as we know, Wolfe's army landed here at the Saint-Foy and came up this path and deployed on the Plains of Abraham here. The French under Montcalm, coming from the Beauport area, crossed the St. Charles Bridge and moved on to the Plains of Abraham, deployed, and faced west. So, Wolfe facing east, Montcalm facing west. Now, most histories of the Battle of the Plains of Abraham will tell you that the battle lasted 20 minutes. That's not quite true. It would be like saying the Battle of Midway, which is like a 2-day naval battle, was won in 15 minutes. Well, the climax of that battle was 15 minutes when the 4 Japanese carriers were sunk. And the battle on the Plains of Abraham is very similar. When Montcalm's army advanced against Wolfe's, and Wolfe's gave, some historians have said, the most perfect volley in history, destroyed Montcalm's army and they fled the field. That part of the battle was 20 minutes, but the battle itself was several hours in the making. So when I orient the game to show you, we're going to orient the map this way. So we'll be looking as if we are the French player looking towards Wolfe's line. Let's take a look at the map. Now, the map itself for the game is about 17 inches by 11 inches or so it is not large, but it does not need to be. And we're going to zoom in and take a look at the counters close up very soon, because I think the counters are just the cat's meow. I think they're really nice. You do get cards with the game. You get 8 cards for the French player and 8 cards for the British player. And with the use of those cards, you'll be moving the units. You also get some French reinforcements that could have come from Beauport and from behind Wolfe's line, coming from Cap Rouge. Over to the upper left here, you have the Saint-Foy, where Wolfe's men climbed the heights and deployed on the Plains of Abraham. These are the cliffs. You can't go into the St. Lawrence River, of course. And over on the right were also some cliffs, but that's not depicted on the map. So this is a very tight little wee battlefield. I think this is about a mile, maybe a mile and a quarter across. It's a very small battlefield. And the sides were rather evenly matched. I think total they had about 3,500 men each. Each counter represents a formation. For the regulars, it's usually a battalion, like the Languedoc Regiment or the Rien. You've got the militia, and when we show the counters close, you'll really see how cute these counters really are. You've got the walls of Quebec here with the artillery. You've got this little hill called Le Butte au Niveau. The Plains of Abraham itself was fairly wide open with scattered trees and bushes to the right. There you have the hospital, the St. Charles River here with the bridge, and off in the distance the Dumont Mill, where the Battle of Saint Foy was later fought the next spring. In many ways, this game reminds me a bit of the old SPI Napoleon at Waterloo. Cosmetically, it kind of looks like that, doesn't it? But I can assure you that for like a 3-page game, this has got one heck of an innovative little battle system. And I'm going to show you that when I go closer to look at the counters. And we'll also take a look at the cards, which is really the meat of the game. Now, it sounds absurd. Well, you've only got 8 cards per side. But with those 8 cards, you can get a lot of variability. The game is about 24 turns long maximum, and the objective is to destroy 12 units of the enemy. Once you've done that, you've got a victory, and the game instantly ends. Should the Quebec militia come out of the fortifications, and that takes a card, the British would then have to destroy 14 units. But let's take a look at the counters and the cards a bit more closely. Okay, here's a closer view of the French line and some of the units. We'll go from the left here. You can see the little wee, well, like little coonskin cap. That's the coureur de bois, runners of the woods. And the 2 is the attack factor, 5 is the defense factor, 3 is the movement factor. And the little circled 2 is the range of the units. Here you've got the French militia with the little toques there. And you've got the regular battalion of the Royal Roussillon. It's got the little wee tricorn hat. You've got French artillery here. Here's the Guienne regiment. And that's the Béarn. And that's the Languedoc. That's the La Sarre, some more French artillery, and French militia. And on the ramparts of Quebec itself, you've got this naval battalion French, some more militia, heavy guns. Notice they have 0. They can't move. And troops manning the walls of Quebec. Over on the left, you've got the French militia again, and of course the Indians with their little war bonnets. Over on the French right, you've got more coureurs de bois and some more Indians. This fellow's out of place. There we go. Okay, so we'll look at the British line. Similar, of course. The numbers are the same. Attack, defense value, movement. And most of the British line is British regulars, having the tricorn hat. And they've got a cute little wee Scottish tam here for the 78th Highlanders. Notice the defense value on these guys, 7. It's because these guys also carry claymores. Way down by the Foulon, you've got the British Light Infantry. By the way, is under Colonel Howe, who later becomes the commander-in-chief of the British forces in North America during the American Revolution. And you've got the Rangers down there, guarding the Foulon. So that's the way the game sets up. You've got the setups actually right on the board, and you've got a bit of variability in the setup too. There's also a variant where you can set up the forces in various formations. You've got this little symbol here, which is kind of neat. I like this because this is a fortress, Quebec, and the men just can't exit off the walls wherever they want. So they have to leave by one of these 2 gates. I believe that's the Saint Louis gate, and that's the Saint Jean gate. So troops can only exit Quebec by those 2 roads. And there's the St. Charles River and the retreat route of the French. The French are not allowed to go below this line. If they retreat below this line, they are eliminated. So let's take a look at some of the cards. And since there's only 8 for each side, I think we can look at each one. Okay, we're looking at the backs of the cards. They've got that famous print of Quebec that I like so much. And let's take a look at each card. So each card will state exactly what you can do on a particular turn. So for example, march attack. Well, it says see below plus 2 other units. Combat see below. Well, move all French regular units towards the closest British units. All French units adjoining British units must attack this turn. So we won't read every card. We'll give you an idea of what they're about. Coureur de bois. You can move 3 French units and have combat with 2 French units. Vive la France. Move all militia French units plus 2 other units. Combat 5 French units. And most of the cards go along that way. Bougainville marches. This is an important one because that's the column that could arrive in Wolfe's rear. Bougainville was upriver up at Cap Rouge, and if these troops come into Wolfe's rear, that could certainly change things. Senior officer wounded. Movement none. Combat 3 French units. Subtract -1 from all French attacks this turn. This little print, by the way, shows General Montcalm, after he was wounded, being brought into the city. Garrison released. This way you can release some of the Quebec City units. Steady advance. And Vaudreuil arrives. He was the governor of New France at the time. A word about the poor old General Montcalm here. Only in Canada do you get a battle where both army commanders were killed. Wolfe was killed right on the field. He died nearly instantly. Montcalm was severely wounded and he died the next day. Now for the British, you've got the Royal Americans, which is 3 British units move, combat with 2. Skirmish, cruelty, and devastation. And there's a little wee print of the Wolfe's men climbing the heights. Light troops, movement 4 British units, combat 3. Highlanders, move British 3, combat 2. Wolfe's presence, reinforcements arrive. And the British do have some reinforcements. Double charge volley, 3 British units, 2 British units. Add +1 to all British attacks during combat this turn. This would be the equivalent of the tactic that actually won the battle. Devastating volley, which destroyed the French army. Townsend reacts. Townsend was one of Wolfe's brigadiers. That gives you an idea of what the cards are like. Each turn you're going to draw a card. You're going to move and have combat with those units that you wish. And away you go. Let's see how a typical combat works. And why do I think this game is so innovative? Now, when I first saw the game, I thought it would be just Napoleon at Waterloo, rigid zones of control, look up a table, and away you go. That is not the way this game works. It's reminiscent to me a little of the Gettysburg game produced by Avalon Hill in 1988. So what you do is, I'll pull a card, move some French troops, and show you how a typical combat works. Okay, let's say for the sake of argument, the French pull this card, and the French do move first in the game. So it's quite clear the French are allowed to move 3 units. They can have combat with only 2. And they say if I roll a 6, I roll a 1, the Quebec City units can move and attack subject to the card limits this turn. So that would free some of these units in Quebec City. But let's just do a typical move and let's see what happens. Okay, now because we're zoomed in here, I can't show you really a far shot of what we're doing, but I think the units will just squeeze in the picture. It says I can move 3 French units. So let's move Lassar, let's charge right in. Let's say Lassar just charges in, he's got a movement factor of 2. He goes 1, 2. Rigid zones of control, he must stop. Okay, we're allowed to move 2 more. Let's have the Regiment of Béarn go in, 1, 2, and he intends to attack. And for the third move, let's say you're allowed to go double on the roads, so I'll have the militia here go a little bit further. You can go 2 for 1 on the road if you stay totally on the road. So we'll have the militia come up here and guard our flank. So now we've got 2 regimental sized battles. Lassar versus the British 58th and Béarn versus the 28th. It doesn't matter the order we do the battles, but here's a typical battle. Now what's interesting about the battle system, you don't look up tables, and I'm so impressed with the number of rules he's been able to get into 2.5 pages. Anyway, what you're supposed to do is the French player will roll 1 die and add his attack factor to that die. Let's do that first and see what he gets. Okay, he rolls a 3. So you add the 3 to the 2, which is a 5. And that number has to equal or exceed the British defense value, which is 6. So the fire from Lassar has not done anything to the 58th. it held firm. It's that simple a combat. So we'll go over to the Baron Regiment, who's also going to roll a die, and he gets a 1, which again, almost like history, is not enough to drive the British 28th away. And since we did roll a 1, as the card said, the Quebec City units can move and attack subject to the card limits. But I've already moved those 3 units, so no French units will be able to move. So that's how simple the card system is. Let's do one British turn and see what they get. Okay, the British draw this card, and it's kind of appropriate actually, Wolfe's Presence. Wolfe himself was over here on the right with the Louisbourg Grenadiers when he received his fatal wound. But we're over here in the center, and it says, okay, the British can move 4 units. Well, if I play this right, the British are going to be able to do a pretty good devastating counterattack right away. Let me look at the battlefield here and we'll see what we can do. Okay, I think the best thing to do would be to counterattack these overzealous French units. Now we're allowed to move 4 British units, so I'll move the 2nd Battalion of the 60th in here. And I can only have combat though with 3. And maybe I'll move this 3rd Battalion of the 60th, which happens to be lingering in the rear here. He'll go up 1, 2. The movement factors are very small in this game. So let's have the 3 British units attack. And you are allowed to have 2 units on 1. They can attack individually, like a normal attack, or they can attack together. But if they do, the British add 1 to the die roll. But I might end up doing 2 separate attacks. I might even attack these militia units here. Anyway, let's do this first combat. The 28th Regiment fires a volley at the Baron Regiment. So the British follow through now, rolling a die. And they get a 1, which is not very good. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 does not exceed the defense value of the Baron Regiment. So the 28th Regiment fire does nothing at all. The 58th will now take on the Lassar. They fire. Roll a die. And again a 1. Aha. Powder must be wet. So it does no effect on Lassar. We now have the 2nd Battalion of the 60th. And I'd really intended to take on this militia, so I think that's what the 2nd Battalion will do. He'll roll a die, and he gets a 2. And again, the fire is ineffective for not exceeding the defense value of the militia. So that's how the combat works. And this will go back and forth, with each side taking its turn, flipping to the British, and so on, until the game is completed or until you have destroyed the 12 units. So that's it mainly for the battle system. And I'm so impressed with it that I'm almost thinking of doing a variant, because the Battle of Saint Foy was fought on the same ground the next spring. The British were actually on this side after taking Quebec, and the French were on the side that Wolfe was coming from. They came from Montreal. And the British sallied out of Quebec. It was fought on the same ground. The French defeated the British, and the British had to retreat back into Quebec. And what decided the campaign was the presence of English vessels who arrived first in the spring. So I'm very impressed with this game indeed. And like I said, I'm biased because I have a particular interest in the Battle of Quebec. Now, there's lots of books on the Battle of Quebec and the siege in general. But the one that stimulated my interest as a young man was this one. In 1972, I bought it. I bought it for the cover. I loved it because I love that painting. And it was by Oliver Warner with Wolfe to Quebec. That's a very good introductory book. This one came out later, Gordon Donaldson's Battle for a Continent, Quebec 1759. Also a very good book. More recently, Stephen Brumwell did an excellent biography of General James Wolfe, and this is an alternate painting about the death of Wolfe. This is a very, very good book. This one is actually the memoirs of John Knox, who was present at the siege. So if you want eyewitness accounts, this is a very good book. Again, more recently, this one was very good. A Bard of Wolfe's Army, which is really the memoirs of a gentleman volunteer named James Thompson, born 1733, died in 1830. And he's got, again, eyewitness accounts of the battle on the Plains of Abraham. Of course, there's the old Osprey books. They've been around for a while. This is an old one having to do with Montcalm's army. Lots of nice illustrations in that one. This one is really good because this is part of their campaign series by our local historian, René Chartrand. And this is an analysis of the battle itself. And you can see the exact dispositions of the troops on the Plains of Abraham. Very fine book. This is a little bit off topic. Louisbourg, 1758, Wolfe's first siege. Louis XV's army, okay. And again, an old Osprey one, Wolfe's Army by Robin May. And I also got this one, The Rest to Fortune, The Life and Times of Major General Wolfe by Robin Riley. Okay, we're looking at Benjamin West's Death of Wolfe painting. Now, I first saw the painting when I was 9 years old at the Ottawa Art Gallery, and it left a lasting impression on me. I remember looking at these soldiers close up and just taking in every detail. And I always wanted to know what this place looks like today. Where is this? Does this ground still exist? There's the St. Lawrence. You can see the spires of Quebec in the distance, and a volunteer running towards Wolfe to give him the news of the battle. You can see sailors. They're dragging a gun up. You see a little bit of blood on Wolfe's coat, an Indian in the foreground, Rogers Rangers. Now this painting is not historically accurate. Art never pretends to depict history. It's a romantic version of the death of Wolfe. In real life, I think only 3 people were with him. The surgeon, a volunteer here, and I think this fellow was here. So art doesn't always reflect history. But this is the painting that captured my imagination as a child. And who knows, maybe that's what gave me my first interest in history. Well, this isn't an art history class, so let's get back to the game. So I'll close up. It's obvious that I really like this game, Battle of Quebec, 1759, by an obscure little company. They appear to be specializing in doing small games that are to be used with in conjunction with museum shops and historic sites and stuff. So they're not a mainstream game company. And I got mine from Noble Knight Games, distributor. So it's still around, and if you want a simple, fun to play, maybe an hour or so game, you might want to consider this one. So that's it. That's all. And again, thank you for watching.